speaking of going wherever it goes, as far as putting this out, this should be with Cactus, not with Secret Agent 23 Skidoo, because the thing is, Secret Agent 23 Skidoo is one angle of what I do, but like I don't want to limit the conversation to
I'm going to write that down because I'll get it out quick, and if I don't write that down, I might just, there's going to be a lot of things we say.
Yeah.
So,
go for it.
Episode 89, Cactus.
Cactus.
All right. In parentheses, 23, or just...
Nah.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I mean, the more we do that, the less I can talk about certain things.
Okay, right.
You know what I mean?
I think I understand.
Yeah.
Because, like, yeah.
That's the thing about being a family entertainer.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? It's like I don't mind sharing more than exists within that particular personality. You know what I mean? I think it's going to be a better conversation if we do that. Mm-hmm. But if we do that, then that's more Cactus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is Cactus like, does that go back to the GFE days?
Yeah, I mean, I've had that name since I was like 14 or 15. Is like I was sitting in my room trying to dream up a better version of myself, I guess. And meanwhile, I was
still doing that.
Yeah, we all are, man. Smoking weed, listening to Primus, and I drew this character. I drew this like comic book type thing called Cactus Man, and in the comic book, this character named Cactus Man, like basically in this world, the entertainment was called head pins, and it was like something that you would stick directly into your head. People had these holes in their heads, right?
Like Hellraiser?
Bigger. Imagine like almost like a cone, like a big, you know.
Okay, yeah.
And the artist would stick them in their heads, and then they would try to focus on like a specific emotion, like pure love or pure hate or whatever it is. And Cactus Man in the comic book would stick it in his head and then just do loads of psychedelics, and then that was like the product that he was putting out into the world.
Yeah.
You know. And I mean, it's funny because I think we're getting closer and closer to that all the time.
Yeah, eventually family entertainment and that, I think they're starting to get they'll probably never fully overlap, but I think that
I mean, that's
a good thing. I read Michael Pollan's book, you know, the How to Change Your Mind, and I was like, this is starting to feel like people are really starting to see it's the time to maybe listen a little bit more to the planet.
So.
And
I think psychedelics are becoming destigmatized a lot, which is great.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of things are going both directions at once right now, though.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And that's what my whole mission with art is, to try to be in between, because I feel like I relate to both. You know, I love going out in the country and doing shows for people that go to church and may have voted differently than me. Yeah. And then I love going to West Asheville and hanging out with the freaks.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, with the family music, I definitely end up, you know, everywhere, which is good because, again, I think in a lot of ways doing the family music has probably saved me from being a lot more cynical.
Yeah.
Just because that is the lane that in a lot of ways I'm forced to focus on, you know, to kind of like really push forward with like positivity and hope and, you know, inclusiveness. Inclusiveness for me, obviously, it's not going to be a problem with the more like kind of far out people. But to me, sometimes like some of the folks you're talking about get on my damn nerves. You know what I mean?
And that's the problem with like I've always hung out with these crazy punk rock liberals, and that's the issue I have with that. My crew that I love now is they're going like, all these idiots out there, they're dumb, and it's like, you're saying inclusion's important. Like, how about like they're not dumb. Like they're just a different culture.
They just think different.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. I think that a lot of times it comes down to, you know, especially if you're on the fringe and you're learning about inclusion from that perspective, it's pretty easy to think about including other people on the fringe because for the most part, they don't really have a lot of power. They don't have a lot of power to influence other people. Now, all of a sudden, if you're talking about allowing people to have their viewpoints when they're the mainstream that actually influences things like legislation and, you know, what is allowed in this country, then it becomes a bit more of a paradox, right?
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, you know, again, it's like I try to realize that regardless of how much I search for what I think is the truth or whatever, it's like I'm only going to get one version of it. So I've stopped thinking of it as a capital T type of thing and stopped thinking of it as like, you know, only one perspective is going to dominate. But
totally. But being in pursuit of it is trying to get closer to the lowercase truth. Yeah,
and I mean, the more you accept that, the more you're willing to just listen to what somebody else says and see what it is to live inside of their skin.
Yeah, and that's what that's really what we need more of. That's me. I have kids, and
Yeah.
it's interesting you said like doing family stuff, because I've started to do more clean comedy.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I've never been that dirty, but I like just watch the open mic night, and I'm like, okay, so much of it is just like the whole joke is just like saying like pussy hairs at the end or whatever, and that's fine. But if you work clean, you can get booked and you can get paid more. So I kind of have started running my stuff through that filter, being like, if this is a great bit, can I still do it anywhere? And similar to what you said, that's kind of helped me just focus on inclusion and optimism, like this new type of inclusion that's like everybody, even people who aren't inclusive. Let's try to include them. I want them to have a good time tonight. I'm not going to tell them they're dumb, because that's just going to make them dig their heels in more.
Well, that's another point too. Is like, if you're up there doing comedy, if I'm up there doing music, right? We're also not legislating anything. So we're allowed to kind of like, blend with things that if we were making decisions for everybody in the world, we might feel differently about. But ultimately, as an entertainer, that's not what you're doing. You might influence something by planting seeds in somebody's brain. That's a beautiful thing. But you're not going to end that night having like changed the way things work,
Which is great, because I don't know if you want.
No.
Yeah. I mean,
not at all. Not at all. But I mean, that's where I think a lot of times like people get mad at comedians about saying certain things, Dave Chappelle being an example.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, he's not legislating anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, he might be influencing thought or whatever, but like, I think that we should be in a place where we're allowed to entertain opinions that we don't agree with, because entertaining opinions is how you open your mind.
Totally.
And even if you don't agree with it, then having somebody say something that you don't agree with, and especially having a conversation with them, it's either going to sharpen your point and make you understand it more, or it's going to make you understand that your point is not that sharp and it's just a reflexive thing that has to do with the people that you hang out with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, like not being afraid to be wrong or change your mind. That's been a cool thing about being like older. Just the humiliations kind of stack up in your life. And then comedy, it's like there's always a brutal public humiliation. So that kind of has helped me be a little more like, I don't need to be right about things as much.
What got you into the comedy thing?
I mean, I think comedy is music. I think it's like you got beer and you got whiskey. Like, this is not my analogy, but you're distilling it down to something. Like, I almost think comedy is like music distilled down to just like one voice, a stool, and a microphone.
Yeah, there's nothing to hide behind.
Yeah, so in that sense, it's the same thing. I've been journaling for 30 years, trying to just get a good idea. And then you have kids, and it's like scheduling with musicians. And I would drink and yell. I did a lot of punky stuff, and it's like, bringing people laughter. I look back at a lot of the stuff I did in my 20s especially, and I'm like, I'm just complaining. Like, all the art is, it's like angry song, sad song,
Yeah.
Like, I'm the guy that I'm criticizing now that's like, you're wrong. He listened to my ideas. And comedy just, it's like I'm trying to atone for all the miserable art that I made, which I still love, like a great sad song, but I just feel like it was a lot of that. And
I think that's one thing I've definitely found with the family music is like, it's harder to make a cool song about positive things. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot harder, even like it's harder to make good hip hop in a major key.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's something about a grimy minor key, either complaint or commiseration, that just like everybody can get on board with that.
Yeah.
I think that we're a little bit more afraid to get on board with positive things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a theme that comes up on here a lot, is like a 90s, like I was a teenager in the 90s, and I feel like now it's been long enough that I can see that the culture was so cynical. Like, it was like, don't be a poser, don't.
Yeah.
It was, so I think a lot of it for me, like I think the kids now are actually kind of better in that way.
Yeah,
they are. Like, positivity is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And supporting people's cool, whereas like it's I'm still trying to like shake off some of that.
Oh yeah.
90s,
I mean,
like there's a part of me that's just like my form to think like cynical's cooler than being positive.
That's like the coolest crab in a bucket.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like the more intelligently you can rip something else down, the cooler you are. Which, like, we need that.
Yeah.
That's important.
Sometimes.
But at the same time, like, how intelligently can you build something up? Yeah. You know what I mean? Or how much can you, like, throw off the shackles like you're talking about? of being vulnerable in public, doing something that you actually really like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's, man, like making the transformation to being a family performer. And especially for me, that a big part of that was for the first time ever rapping sober. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So not only am I like up there doing something that feels like almost like the polar opposite of what I'm used to doing, but I'm also doing it sober for the first time.
Right. It's just both things. It's you don't have
man.
that like a little bit of numbness thrown on it. It's just like stone cold.
That's right.
Daytime light.
That's right. Daytime
so it's
light.
Like, usually.
Not only are you sober, the audience too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And also for me, that was the step from being in a band with like, you know, up to 14 people in it at times, at least 7 people in it, at least like, you know, 2 other rappers, to all of a sudden it's just me up there with like, you know, maybe one singer or a DJ or something like that. Sometimes my kid, which was great, but like, man, it was a big step into not only the type of vulnerability we're talking about, but also into like truly embracing the positive stuff. Cause it's like, yeah, it's it feels like a little bit more of a tightrope sometimes to maintain something that's like funky or cool and at the same time talk about positivity and love and all that. But like, isn't that where we want to be? You know what I'm saying? Like, isn't that the direction that you're trying to stretch yourself into?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the discomfort of going to the gym or like eating good food instead of fried food. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, oh, this kind of sucks. But at the same time, it's like, this is what I want to head towards, right? Like,
Long
it's
term.
better.
Yes. Instead of just like the short-term dopamine hit of
Yes.
just ripping on something. Like it feels good to talk shit. You know, it's like,
it feels great.
That's one of the cool things about this podcast is I've noticed like, not that we would talk shit, but like talking with other comedians like outside the mic, sometimes you'll kind of slip into it a little. And I'm like, I'm doing it. But when you record a conversation with people just inherently bring more positivity in their A game. So I think that's kind of a cool side effect of the podcast I've noticed is like people aren't going to come on here. You just have that filter where you are kind of going, this is going on the internet. So
why do you think that is? You think that's just the
accountability, the cowardice
that's
of like,
it, right?
I mean, which I do. I mean, I do it less than I ever have, but sometimes I'll just find myself being like, oh, I'm starting to kind of talk a little shit again. And then like with the cameras on you, you go, ooh.
That's really real, man. Like, it's so funny. I'll be having, because I've been in this town a long time and I've been doing the skidoo thing for a long time. So like, I'll have days where like, I'm just feeling grumpy as hell. And just kind of like, man, I'm like not going to be a dick to somebody, but like at the same time, I'm not turning it on either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then like, I'll be like at the post office or something like that. And the person behind the counter will be like, oh, you're 23 skidoo, right? And I'm just like, damn, like this is really keeping me accountable. Like I have to not only be accountable to not be a dick, but like I for the most part should try as much as I possibly can to be genuinely enthusiastic about life, because that is the thing that I'm preaching and that is the thing that I actually believe in. So it's like, it's kind of nice in a way. I guess it's like when you have, you know, somebody you're with that sees the best version of you. And so when you show up with them, you kind of like become the best version of yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. That's cool. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, it's like this podcast thing I was talking about, not talking shit. You're kind of just walking around Asheville with that, like
somewhat.
If you like go crazy and just start yelling at people, like, "Whoa, it's
that guy!"
It's good to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, but I think like people kind of love that too. Like when somebody like that is supposed to be one thing, like messes up royally, as long as you can say you're sorry. Like, I mean, if you ever need to like give your career a bump, you know?
Yeah,
if
right.
you like freak out and like do very unskidoo things, and then you're like humble, people go, that's like people that inspires people. Like, it's kind of a positivity that comes from screwing things up. You know what I mean? Like like I've always thought that there's things within the realm of positivity that are not within the realm of good manners, I guess. You know, what people consider to be clean, whatever. Like, so for instance, people are surprised, I think, how much I swear. And I have no problem with swearing. I, even with my kid, had no problem with swearing. I'm like, know that your grandma's not going to like it.
Right.
Maybe don't say it in front of her.
That's it. I told my kid, I was like, there's a difference between manners and respect. Right. Yeah. So manners is like a universal system of rules that you're supposed to follow no matter what. Respect is you trying to understand the person you're with and what they like and what they don't like.
There's some empathy involved.
And then also deciding, do they deserve your respect? So there's also that, you know what I'm saying? Because authority figures that expect you to be a certain way just because they're authority figures and not because they're in any way being kind or teaching you anything or offering safety or any of the things that an authority figure should be doing, you know, fuck them, right?
Yeah.
And
It's a fear mongering kind of thing.
that's right. And be strategic about it, obviously, because, you know, that's part of it. But like, I've always loved that because, you know, it kind of had a great side effect too, which is I would swear around her all the time, and then she'd be like, "Dad, language." And so I never had to be on her about it.
Same. My kids, it's like this weird reverse psychology. I mean, you can say any of them around me, just know. And then they're like, we don't want to say those words.
Yeah.
And I think it may be because I told them they could. I don't know. But it's odd.
I mean, it definitely takes the taboo out of it.
Yeah.
Takes the spice out of the hot sauce a little bit.
Yeah, that's like the psychedelics thing. It's like it could maybe be a better, healthier thing because it's not got that dangerous.
I think that's true.
Thing.
One thing I'll say that it lacks, though, probably, which I think that, you know, what are you, 45-ish?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. So you had this experience, too, I'm sure, that when you did psychedelics for the first time, you were not only breaking the cultural taboo, but you were also breaking the law.
Yeah.
So
psychedelics are illegal.
There's a rites of passage there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like something that I think that's something that we miss a lot of rites of passage living in this society. Like, you know, we don't, even the religion that we have, I don't think really has rites of passage built in. Even like, think about the fact that if you're going to become a Christian, you just basically show up and you say, I'm a Christian. And they're like, you're in. You know what I mean?
You should have to go up some mountain and
you should
throw up and see visions and cry. You
something.
know? Like,
Something.
Because then it's like really in your DNA. But you're like,
Yeah.
oh, you know, we got to go to Applebee's after and it was.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, we don't really have a struggle to get the thing that we're trying to achieve necessarily. Or if we do, we don't have any guides that are kind of placing it in that kind of context, right?
Yeah.
So like, I've started doing this thing recently where I'm teaching a workshop called the Imaginarium around here, and I'm teaching local kids to write their own rhymes and then get up on stage and rap them in front of people, and then actually they're able to come to a skidoo show and jump up in front of an actual crowd and rap them again. And I'm you know, the whole thing is based on rites of passage, and I talk about that during the thing where I'm like, you know, you just looked inside yourself and you found something that you thought was of value. You thought you found worth inside yourself. And then you sat there and had patience to sit with the uncomfortable feeling of trying to turn that into something that you like even more. And then you overcame the biggest fear in the modern world, which is getting up and talking in front of people and sharing something from inside of yourself.
Yeah.
And it's huge, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I've taught rhyme writing workshops for a long time where they were doing all those things, but I've noticed that me actually kind of like talking about the structure and talking, you know, letting them understand
like
what they just did.
Why we're doing this, yeah.
It's huge. You know, like, we probably overcame a lot of fears when we were kids. I mean, I remember, like, you know, there was a certain set of stairs in my town that if you ollied that shit, like, you were a man, you know what I mean? And ironically enough, I never was able to ollie that until I came back from the road and like did it on mushrooms. And then it was like, wow, I fucking I think I just like, you know, did two different rites of passage at the same time. But again, there was nobody there to root it down and talk about the experience, you know?
Yeah. I love that, the performance, I think the public aspect of it, especially like at the end, getting out, there's something about, there's almost some cleansing. I mean, for one, when you're standing in front of the people, you have to eventually notice whether they're getting it or not. Whereas like I was doing a lot of laptop in my bedroom music before I started comedy, and I feel like it started to be a little like kind of like the whatever the ego death thing sounded like. I still like some of that, just me alone, just following tangents, but you got to kind of check what you're saying with the people and see their eyes and see their bodies, and taking the idea all the way in front of the people. Like, so few people get through that final hoop. That's the hero's journey.
That's right.
And then repeating that, there's just something about that. I feel like it's course correcting me. Like even just with like open mics, you sit there and you listen to like all these people from all these different walks of life and cultural backgrounds tell their stories. If you just go to open mics every week for years, it'll change your soul because you'll just hear stories you would never hear from like the people at work that are demographically like you. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's really cool. I should get my kids to do that.
Hey, we got one this
Imaginarium?
weekend, man.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah?
last session this weekend. But I am going to do a camp this summer too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's like that's something that, again, like, you know, the whole positivity or goodness being something that you're cynical about, right? Like, I remember even after I had been doing this music for a long time, then I guess it was Leaf Festival wanted me to do a workshop at Ira B. Jones around here, and my booking agent's like, hey, so do you teach this, you know? And I was like, man, I'm not a teacher. I'm a fucking musician, man. You know what I mean?
I work outside the law.
Right. That's how it felt. And then she's like, well, if you taught it, we could book it. And I'm like, I'm a teacher. But, you know, going in there and doing that, I mean, I've been doing it more and more over the past probably 5 years especially. And I mean, there's something so cool about it. You know, there's a different feeling. There's connecting with the audience from the stage, which is great. And especially if it's a big crowd, you kind of get that massive rush of energy. But ultimately, the conversation you're having with them is pretty binary. You know what I mean? It's like you can make them go, yay, or you can make them go, no, you know, whatever. But like to actually sit with somebody in the moment of them trying to look inside themselves and find something, and how uncomfortable that is. I mean, you can say something to somebody in that moment that can change the way that they approach that for the rest of their lives.
Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, because I've been a creative kid forever, but I'm pretty much autodidactic, you know, so like I just
Same.
figuring it out along the
Same.
way.
And it was like back then there was just no information.
No,
like,
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if you wanted to seek out guidance, it was like
Couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And if you didn't happen to have somebody in your life like that,
Yeah, like
you just didn't.
Yeah, if there was like a guy on your street, maybe you'd have a shot,
Right.
but that was it. You couldn't get information from
Right.
everywhere in the world.
Which, again, that's a rites of passage in itself. In the same way as, like, having to go into the record store and be like,
Yeah.
you know, what's cool, man?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, rather than
And listen
going
to
to
the guy
Pitchfork
tell
or
you,
whatever. Yeah,
tell
yeah.
you all the shit you picked up to buy sucks. You know?
Oh, yeah. I fucking
But
love
at the
that,
end of
though.
that, yeah.
Dude, I put on a record the other day, and I was just tripping out about it because I grew up in southern Indiana. And
They're hitting baseballs out there too, so there'll probably be some.
no problem. And so Bloomington was our nearest college town. And I remember going there and going to the record store and just being like, what should I get?
Yeah,
And the dude killed it.
yeah.
He said,
And that's why he's got that job.
That's why he's
like,
got that
Thank
job.
you, God. Like
Yeah.
because he wants to be heard. He's like,
Oh,
I got lots of great ideas, and I'm in here.
But dude, he crushed it. He gave me Robert Johnson, Miles Davis Bitches Brew,
Damn.
and Roland Kirk. And like I was listening to that Roland Kirk album the other day, and I was like, this one's the one that's a little off the beaten path considering those. But dude was spot the fuck
Bitches
on.
Brew is insane as
Oh,
well.
it's great.
Man, Robert Johnson, that's just like when I made it to that, I was like, this is
It's the root.
the root of everything. I mean, there's roots before that, but they're not recorded. I
That's
think
right.
It's like 30 songs or something too. Like,
Yeah.
I almost like that it's just
Limited
that
like
much.
that?
Yeah, because you
Yeah.
find every nook and cranny in it.
Yeah, you're right.
Sometimes when you're like David Bowie and you're just like, this is like a million albums, and you're
Yeah.
like, well, you know, I guess I'll just listen to the greatest hits. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
overwhelming. Like,
or Miles Davis.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like I love Miles Davis,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't say that, you know, usually because somebody'd be like, what's your favorite album? I'd be like, I know 3.
Yeah, that's
It's
the
like
same.
Kind of Blues, Sketches of Spain, and that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And like I've heard a little bit of the other stuff, but like again, there's a whole world there. You know?
And I tend to be like, I would prefer to listen to my favorite album 1,000 times than like
Yeah.
listen to 1,000 albums once, or you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, I think you can take more from it. So it's kind of like if you got 3 that you can keep coming back to forever, like that's pretty good. Like 3's a lot.
Well, you know what I notice is, so I do this thing where, and it started accidentally, and then I understood the power of it, and so now it's something that I do consciously, right? So an album is not only kind of a repository of its own information, but it becomes a repository of the emotion that you have during a certain time period where you're listening to it.
Totally.
Right? So if, for instance, you know that you're in a time period that you want to remember, then you can choose an album and you can listen to it over and over and over again in that time period and then put it away.
That's interesting.
And then you know,
Yeah.
and then the weird thing is, you know, like,
Yeah, you're reverse engineering that thing.
Yes.
That we all know.
Yes.
But you're deliberately.
yes, 100%. And I have certain albums that, like, if I need to get pumped up, And it's not just the music itself, it's the time period in which I was listening to it. I can like go and kind of just drink from the limited cup of like that time.
What does that time look like? Is it like a time of struggle, or is it just a time where you're just like feeling confident and crushing it? Like
the one I'm thinking of particularly, it's a moment where I felt like I was in a good groove, and so much so that I could really dedicate like every day to crushing. And, put this album on in the background while I was doing the work to make that happen or whatever. And then that work was successful. And then, and the music itself has got that kind of vibe to it as well. And it's an album called The Olympians, which is fucking great. I recommend it for anybody. It's
perfect title for what you're describing.
I know. And it's not Olympians like the Olympics. It's the gods.
Yeah.
It's basically this French funk group that has an instrumental album that each one of the gods is one of the songs. And it's just like, it feels elevated like that.
Yeah. You do all the gods, or you...
Me?
You go straight to Hercules, or
let's see.
There's probably there's probably a few that are like,
there's some you don't really want to fuck with.
You're like, I'm not trying.
You're like, Pluto's not really doing it for me. That is true. I usually go from the beginning of the album, and obviously they come out strong.
Yeah, they start swinging, and then you're still there for the Pluto.
That's a great question, though. That's true.
Pluto's not even a track anymore, is it? No, it's a track again. Like,
it's not a planet. It's still a god.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
But that kind of thing. And then the thing is, you have to remember that if you're going to go and do that, every time you do it, you're adding a little bit of now into then. So you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Because you'll water it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Yeah, that's kind of like the albums. I do a lot of I'll do some bits about this, but like buying a CD in the 90s where you bring it home and like $17, listen to it all the way through. And it's like, you just have so little content that if you don't like it at first, you keep listening to it until you like it. So it's just a whole different set of like, now I'll like an album, and then I'll be like, that was last week. I almost don't feel there's so many podcasts, I don't listen to it again. So those albums from back in the day are just so weighted towards what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think now it's like every few years something new will break through and make me feel like a teenager again. And I'm always like grateful. I'm like, okay, it could still happen once more. Like there's this band called Culture Abuse that I just found out about. It's a weird band with a weird story. They only put out 29 songs, broke up scandalously. So it's kind of like Robert Johnson, where it's like a small number of songs, but it's like, it's just got all the elements, like hopeful, but it's punky. It's like the right balance of cynicism and hope. And I just found it in the last few weeks, and like I'm feeling that way. I didn't even know I could feel that way. I'm like, this makes me want to pick up the guitar and write songs again.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that's really what the feeling is for me. Is like the best songs make me want to like try to write something that good. You know what I mean? Do you ever use songs to write? You're like, you hear something once and you go, I'm going to try to write my version of that, having only heard it once, because if I listen to it like 8 times, I'll rip off too much.
I mean, not the same, because I don't really write melodies like that. You know what I mean? I think that part of what you're talking about there is kind of like, well, okay, let me back that up.
It's more singer-songwritery, so.
Yeah, but I will say that I will come up with concepts that are definitely based on who I'm into at the time. And there is that thing of like, you don't want to rip them off too directly. And as a matter of fact, sometimes if I work with musicians, I'll show them what the comp is. And then sometimes I won't, because I'll try to like avoid it a little bit. You know what I mean?
The comp is like where you're...
Like the comparison. Like if I'm like, oh, I want to make a song that's like this Budo's Band song.
Right, okay, yeah.
I won't say we're doing Budo's Band. I'll say, let's go heavy with the horns and put a bunch of verb on it.
Because telling them might be too much information. And then you might sound like you're ripping them off.
Which I've definitely done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Probably more than not. I'll be like, here, we're doing Budo's Band. Okay, make it a little different. We're good.
Yeah, that's like the Stones like ripping off Robert Johnson on their first album. It's like that's the greatest form of flattery too.
Although I just heard the second half of that quote. Do you know that?
No.
Okay, so imitation is the greatest form of flattery that a mediocre mind can muster.
Ah, fuck.
Yeah. I paraphrased a little bit there, but the mediocre mind is part of it. I know. That's a kick in the balls when you hear that. You're just like,
I thought it was just a period. Or an exclamation mark. I didn't know there was like some contradictory second half.
Yeah, people leaving off that second half on purpose.
I'm going to put a pin in that to rethink my life this week.
It's something, man.
I mean, my feeling has always been like, the older it is, the more okay it is to steal from it. Like I'm always extremely. I don't even like to watch like the new comedy specials or because it's like I don't want to steal what's out there right now. But like if I try to steal Richard Pryor from the '70s, like there's no way it's gonna be like that.
No.
So it's like I can try as hard as I want to copy it, and it'll be something new. Like
and also I think it's that if you steal so many things at the same time that they become kind of like a new thing, then that's fine, right?
Like from different, like you steal things from different places and mix them together. Yeah.
You know, if somebody is so focused on one thing, like I remember at one point I was listening to Mos Def so much that like we would just be freestyling and like my crew would call me out and they'd be like, "Come on, man," and I'm like, "Yeah, you're right."
And that's what you want, right? I mean, that's
no,
you need that community to be like,
well, right? You want the community,
you want the call out,
right,
yeah, because it's like. You guys tell me first before I go.
Oh yeah, because I didn't know.
Yeah.
I was just like, man, that sounds great right now. Like this shit feels good, and then they're just like, dog, come on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, if you do that and then you mix it with, like a lot of times now, if I'm doing a specific track, I will approach it with maybe an inspiration in my head of like, you know, they probably would rhythmically or vocally handle it like this, and maybe kind of like let that ghost live in my head a little bit while I do it. But then I'll, you know, take it to knowledgeable people. I'll be like, "Do you know who I was thinking of when I did this?" And they're like, "No," and I'm like,
"That's a great test." Yeah. How obvious is it?
Right. Can you tell the flavor of what I'm biting?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk. Like that's probably my favorite topic ever. Is like what your process is actually like. You know, you mentioned like a ghost, like something like. Do you have like I know the real answer is probably every song's different, but as far as like what you start with, you know, you've been doing it for a long time, so like
I kind of do. I mean, not every song. I mean, every song is different, but the way that I approach albums is pretty similar.
You start with an album in mind. You're like, this is going to be a larger work.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I like the idea that an album is an idea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I like an album as a statement. I like an album as a little world, or rather like a galaxy of connected planets.
Yeah.
You know,
back to the Olympians thing.
Hey, there it is.
It's in there.
It is. Really but that's the perfect concept album because of it.
Oh,
right?
yeah. And it's like, it goes with my steal the oldest shit possible because like that's like thousands of years.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
It's like the original.
It's telling the story.
Yeah. Sorry, though. I'm
no, dude, tangents are the shit.
Yeah, that's
I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
No matter where we get, you know, let's respect the tangent.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of times I'll try to come up with a core concept, not like a full-on concept album exactly, although sometimes I've done that, and it's, you know, that can be limiting, but it's also very cool. The most conceptual concept album I did is actually the last full Skidoo album that I put out, the last full length, and it's called Wake Up the Dream, and the concept there is that it is your subconscious and your unconscious as DJs on WREM overnight radio, and they're spinning your dreams, and those are the songs.
There's a lot to subconscious and unconscious are different.
A little bit.
Really?
A little bit.
Should we go on that tangent, or I don't know.
Unconscious is deeper.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like the Jungian, like that's more of like
right.
the like maybe some ancestry or something.
Right.
Okay, yeah. The subconscious is like what's happening in my brain that I might not be perceiving.
Yeah,
like
that's how I see it. Anyway.
Okay,
yeah. I think that you'd probably get different people explaining that different ways.
Yeah,
but I see it as like the unconscious is the super deep part that like you probably won't reach no matter what you do, but it still influences you.
Yeah,
kind of like the bottom of a iceberg.
Yeah.
And then the subconscious is what's right below your conscious that you access through creativity, through dreams, through daydreaming, all that stuff.
Would it be safe to say the subconscious is a bit more like you as an individual, whereas the unconscious might be like more collective? Like as far
I think
like,
that's right.
You get into that, like it's in the air.
I like it.
And your great grandfather's shit could still kind of maybe influence you a little.
You know what? I'm a skeptic, not a cynic, and I care very much about that line.
Yeah.
Because I think I'll put it like this: a skeptic to a cynic, in my understanding of it, is the exact same as an agnostic to an atheist. So what I mean,
slow that down for a second. Can you say it again?
Yes, a skeptic to a cynic.
Okay.
Is an agnostic to an atheist.
Yeah, like a skeptic is still maybe open to be like, I just need to think deeply about this, whereas a cynic's like, I just like it when it's shitty, kind of like that.
Kinda, yeah, I mean, or more
negativity.
Well, more to the point of like a skeptic is like, I'm open to it, but it has to make some kind of sense.
Yeah.
And a cynic is like, I'm not open for business, man.
Yeah.
Like, I'm no more ideas
Yeah.
over here. I've got it fucking figured out. You know,
Yeah.
we're not doing anything else over here.
They're stuck in the 90s, just like
Yeah, right.
poser.
Doors closed, you know?
Okay, I got the first part.
Yeah. So I think, and actually, if you look at it too, and I'm a big word guy in the sense of like, you know, actually me and Foul Mouth Jerk, which is one of the rappers from GFE, we have an ongoing debate over this concept of, is a word defined by its actual definition, or is a word defined by common usage?
Both and more.
Both and more.
Yeah. Context and
On that binary conversation, I stick on the side of common usage, whereas he sticks on the side of dictionary definition. But I will say that I often find, looking at the actual definition of the word, you find a new understanding
It's
of
helpful. It's like, don't not look at the real definition.
No.
But then also, that's like a frozen in time.
Yeah. Trapped in amber.
I mean, that's all the exciting things with language are, just kind of people like it starts
the evolution.
in the streets or wherever, and then it eventually might creep its way into the dictionary or the urban dictionary.
Yeah. Or like you can follow the etymology back through different cultures and you can be like, holy shit, like this is way deeper than I thought that it was.
Yeah,
you know?
that's my favorite thing, is trying to guess before I look it up. Be like, okay, we got 3 words here.
Yeah.
I know what 2 of them, I know what one means and maybe the second one, and then you start.
I love it, man.
And then like you get close. I'm always like closer than I think, you know?
And I love it when they're connected, and then I also love it when they're not. Like, okay, here's some examples. 2 words that I freaked out on today. Secretary, being the fact that the active word there is secret.
Okay, yeah.
So the secretary is the one that keeps your secrets.
Locking that drawer.
Right.
Like, all right, no.
Gives a whole new meaning, right?
Yeah.
Whole new vibe. And then I was trying to look for, because I always spell the word sentence wrong. I always put an A in there. And I was looking for a mnemonic to figure out how to remember it. And then I was like, oh, sentence is just one letter off of sentience. And then I was like, oh, the difference is that sentience has I in it. And then I'm like, whoa. I was like, I am in sentience. And then I was like tripping out. Anyway.
My wife is like, just keep it to your fucking self. Like, I'm like, wait, slow that down. Like, what is that word? Like, I will, sentience and I just love it, you know? And then one of my kids is really into it too. So we'll just kind of go off and like, go down the word rabbit hole.
And then sometimes you'll find things that seem like they can't not be related, but they're not.
Right.
Like dope.
Yeah.
Okay. Dope. Okay, there's 3 meanings of dope, right? 3 meanings of the word dope as
cool,
slang.
Drugs.
Cool, drugs, and fool.
Yeah.
You're a dope.
Okay, yeah. That's
right.
I forgot about that's like
right.
The dwarfs.
None of those have anything to fucking do with the term dopamine.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me.
I mean, I guess drugs is a little to do with it, like, but it's not the same.
No, it's not.
It's different.
Like, etymologically, it's not.
Really?
Which I can't believe.
Yeah.
Because you'd think that that would be the root.
Yeah.
But it's actually a Dutch word, dupe, which it kind of, I can't remember exactly what it means, but I've looked this up multiple times because I'm like,
so sometimes
no way,
they
man.
come from different paths, but then they like they do kind of end up like.
Yeah.
I love it when a word means 2 opposite things. I wish I'd come prepared for this because I have a list of those where it's like, and not even in an intentional way, but a word literally means like.
Can you think of one?
I'm bad at that on
It's
the
all right.
spot.
I feel like I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like, but then it's like that kind of almost leads me to like 2 opposite things are really the same thing. You know, like opposites define each other. Like until you have an opposite, you don't even have a thing. Yeah. So the idea that you get into that, like the yin and yang, where you got a word that's like, wait, why would it mean the 2 opposite things? Because opposites are the same.
Because that's the balance of the universe.
Yeah, they like lock in together, and you can just. The words are just kind of like a gateway, but it's really like the ideas and the people, and it's always kind of sloshing around and changing.
I love that. I love the things that you can figure out, especially if you figure out root words. Like, all right, here's one that I love. The word humus, Humus, right?
Yeah.
It means ground. It means like dirt.
Yeah, I don't know that one.
It's the root word of humility, humiliation, humor, and human.
And hummus, you know,
and hummus.
Which is chickpeas are down on the ground. I don't think they grow on trees. I think
I'm down with chickpeas.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, especially like grounding and humility, because it's like you got that right in there. It's like, why would you avoid, like, I mean, that's the comedy and the old novels. Like, I like reading these old books where the character usually has to suffer a brutal public humiliation in order to transcend. Yeah. Like, you can't not make a jackass of yourself.
Yeah.
So that's why at the post office, maybe it'd be all right to freak out, you know. But like,
As long as it's good natured.
but yeah, it's like there is a grounding, like humility is like, why do we avoid that?
Yeah.
You know, like
You need it.
yeah,
You
if
need it.
don't,
And
you're
that's and I love
becoming-
that humor's in there too.
Yeah,
Because it's like
right.
if you don't go through the levels of humility or humiliation, then you never get to the level of humor.
Right. Yeah. Humor does. That's kind of what it is. One way of looking at humor is it cuts through bullshit and it like brings things back down.
Right. Like it brings things to a humility level, but also a lot of times I think you reach humor by being humiliated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the great equalizer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Humming.
Okay. All right.
I haven't figured out how it. You know, when you make sounds, it kind of makes you feel grounded. Back
All
in your
right,
body.
I'm with you.
You're thinking too much to start. Just hum a little bit. You know, bring you to eat some hummus. Hum a tune.
So albums. How do I make albums? So come up with a concept. Then what I tend to do is I'll come up with the idea for the hook first, and then kind of like build off the song of like what it's supposed to be. And then I'll actually get together with musicians and we'll put that all down and have it figured out. And I'll pretty much have the song even structured and everything like that before I ever write the lyrics. Like to me, the actual writing of the lyrics is last.
So you've even got the number of bars loosely in mind, or you
Sometimes.
stretch that? I mean that, yeah. So you kind of have like, I mean the hook is kind of like the chorus or whatever, like the line, the tagline.
Yeah.
And that might be sung or said, repeated.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like frame out the house. So you got spaces.
Yeah, and sometimes I do it in such a way that it could be extended. But like, for instance, the one I was talking about, the Wake Up the Dream, you know, that was one that I did no drum machines or anything like that, all live band stuff. So when that stuff was done, the structure was the structure, and that's it. And I had to fit whatever the concept is within that structure, which I really like, actually. I like the challenge of that, you know, because it's like, I don't know, I think...
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
I know exactly. Let me take a stab at it. Like, yeah, it's like because if I start with a piece of paper and an acoustic guitar, and that's the idea. It's always going to be like 4, 8, 12. It's going to be like an even square thing. Whereas like if I just like make sounds in a room and kind of crash around and then try to put lyrics on top of that, it's going to have that one extra 13th bar.
Yep.
And then I'm going to have to figure out how to make the lyrics work that way, and then later on it'll always be my favorite thing. That irregularity that you had to, you know what I mean? Is it kind of that? Did I get close?
It is kind of that. I mean, it's like it's that mixture of those two things where it's like if you love structure too much, you know, it could almost get a little bit OCD. But if you mix the idea of a pre-existing structure that might not be perfect with then having to come and put something on top of it, then it ends up the thing you're talking about.
Yeah, you put that pressure on yourself. It's kind of like throwing a little crowd work or something new into your set, because if you just run these are the jokes that I know them, it's not as human and as alive as there needs to be spots where everyone's looking at you and the structure is irregular in the song. You just have to make it work.
Oh,
you
I
have
love
to
it, man.
and that pressure will pull something out that. When I go back, those are always my favorite moments.
Me too.
When I was
With the
out of control and
performances
scared,
too, man.
that's where the
Like,
good stuff comes from.
We've been doing freestyle back into the shows recently because I have a new band member now. Her name is Kendi from Charlotte. And it's cool, too, because she's 30 years old, which is very different from my 49-year-old ass, you know what I mean? And she freestyles, which is fantastic because I've had a lot of band members in that group, but never anybody that really felt comfortable freestyling. And so now we've been every single show freestyling, and that's like often my favorite part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, we'll have people give us words and everything and like almost like improv style, just have to like come up with the thing on the spot. And especially that, like, I mean, there's just expressing yourself, which is cool, but there's kind of like in the moment in front of a bunch of people, here's 5 words, you have 2 minutes, go. Like, that's great.
Because they know it's just for them. You know, like
that's right. It'll never happen again.
Because like there's so much content on screens, and the show can feel like a screen. People can almost think they're looking at, but something like that really jolts the audience. Like I love to sprinkle in like, if the audience isn't laughing at jokes, just try some crowd work. Even if a big pop doesn't come, it resets the energy. It lets them know this is a live thing.
It's breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's like, I think because we watch screens so much more now, and maybe because screens are so much bigger, right, that you actually can almost, without thinking about it in a public place, slip into that same thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like you don't even really have to react. You don't have to clap. You don't have to laugh because you're just watching something.
Yeah, just be a cyborg. It's easy.
Right.
You know?
And it's like as much as people fear being on stage, I think now people are starting to fear being in the audience a little bit. You know, it's like there's an expectation of them actually having to do something.
Yeah.
And I think people are pretty stressed out about that sometimes.
Yeah, it's like the like a good comedy room will always like not bring out all the chairs. They'll just be the front row, so you have to go in and sit there. Then they bring out the second row because what happens is people don't sit up front because they're that same fear.
Yeah.
And then you have a bad show because people are like hiding in the shadows in the back, and then you get them up front. And then some comedian comes out and is a total asshole to the people in the front row, and you're like, this is why. You just set us back 10 years, dude.
Oh,
like,
that's funny.
Just
man.
mean to them with no jokes, you know? Like, you're the reason these people are afraid.
I went through a period of time where any comedy show that I went to, for some reason, I'd be the one that they'd pick out.
Oh, yeah?
You know? And of course, the minute they do and start asking questions, it's like, I'm a fucking gold mine for them. Because it's like, what's your name? It's like Cactus. They're like, oh, really? And they're like, and what do you do? What's your job? And I'm like,
they just tear their set list up. They're like, we're just going to do this.
We're just going to do this for the next 20 minutes, you know? But I love it, man. It's
great.
you
don't mind it?
No, it's great. It's fucking great. It's like,
it's,
you know, it's a gift to me in a way, as much as like my head will get hot and I'll be like, oh God. But I mean, I've had it go all the way to them being like, oh, you're a rapper? Come on up and rap then.
Yeah.
You know, and that actually ended up great. And it was like a little shitty comedy club in Dublin, and it was fucking dope.
Yeah.
You know, and that was, you know, that's one of my favorite memories even of Ireland, because I felt like it was this really quick path to have that almost rites of passage thing of acceptance, where it's like,
right.
You know, it's like, oh, well, you're here. And, you know, you're around people that are proving themselves or even just like deserve to be here because they were born here. Why do you deserve to be here?
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of like, it's great to have that moment where you can be like, because I'll do the thing that you're asking, because I'll, you know, participate.
Yeah, it sounds like the thing you're doing with kids, you know, like it's
Right.
like that you walked in the door of the bar or whatever as a kind of a stranger.
Right.
But then like by the time you leave, people know your story and you performed on stage.
Yeah, and it was great.
Yeah.
And I felt at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the best.
It is.
I mean, and it's hard. I think people have a hard time not getting defensive or being like when you start talking to somebody, it's like, even though they might want that outcome, it takes a lot of calmness and confidence to.
It's because people are afraid of being made fun of because they have been made fun of their whole life, because that's the society we live in.
Right.
Like, so for a long time, I performed with a top hat on, right? Like, first it was a purple top hat, and then
I've
it was
seen the pictures.
You know what I'm talking about.
I did my research.
Okay. So, you know, with that, if I'm flying someplace, I'm not going to fucking have a hat box. So that means that no matter what, I have to walk through the airport with a top hat on.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not doing the whole suit or whatever, but I'm just like wearing my normal clothes with a top hat. People's response to that is really funny. Some people, a good amount of people, and especially the more white they are and the more like kind of upper class they are, they think that I'm making fun of them. Like not as in like top hat rich guy thing, but there's just this subconscious thing that I see happen where they see me and their face does this thing of like, this isn't normal. Why isn't this normal? Or like, are you pranking me somehow? Is this you know? And I don't think they think it through as far as like, is this a prank show or anything? But I think they're just like, the disruption of their normal life feels like an offense to them.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why is because they're afraid of not being in control of the situation.
Yeah, I think like, yeah, there's a few comedians, we talk about clean, and there's a few comedians that I can think of that I work with that never do any graphic sex, never drugs, never like cursing, but there's something about their perspective that makes those same like kind of older white people with money go, it's just threatening like what I've built my identity on.
Yeah.
Is it sort of like that where it's like, there's nothing you could say that actually happened in a police report. There was an assault, but they feel assault, like you're assaulting their identity,
something like that
in some way. Which is, I guess,
a weird thing.
You're pretty insecure if like,
yeah.
And I guess we're just like people that have embraced making weird art, so it's not everybody's just hanging out with weirdos all the time, trying to
out-freak
sometimes
each
you
other.
forget. Yeah, you're like, they're just in the rat race trying to like survive.
Yeah.
So that must be really scary that you're going to get called out. You know.
Well, and that's the thing, right?
Maybe they want to wear the purple hat. Maybe there's some
that's
like
what I mean.
Subconscious
the chasm between where they're at and being able to do weird shit in public is so far that like, you know, somebody doing it annoys them.
Yeah, like they want to see you get like taken down. Like that would be like this shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, right. It's called the tallest poppy syndrome. You heard this? It's something that I can't remember what country. I know that definitely. What's his name? Reese Darby. Am I saying that right?
I don't know.
That's the guy. That's the New Zealand comic. He played the manager in Flight of the Conchords.
Oh yeah.
He played the head werewolf.
Oh yeah, he's hilarious.
In What We Do in the Shadows, where he says, "We're werewolves, not square wolves." But he has a whole show called Tall Poppies.
Okay.
So, and it's all about weirdos. And so I think at least New Zealand, but
there it is.
Yeah, Murray.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the idea being that like the tallest poppy is the one that gets cut. So don't be the tall poppy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a huge concept every place. America's a little different because we're kind of ostensibly anyway based on being rebels. But I also think that the way that things have developed is like sometimes the social pressure here is almost as bad as anywhere. I mean, probably not as bad as like Japan.
Yeah.
But
it's also, we're catching up. I think like late stage capitalism is real. Like it used to be like, just grab you a piece of land and do whatever. And now it's kind of like, well, some people have a lot of it. And it's, I think we're headed towards that old world classism.
Well, I think the weird thing too, though, is the performative aspect of what we have. Like, what I mean is this: yes, we're headed towards that thing you're talking about, but in that world, all right, like put it this way, and this is going to be a deep cut for those who didn't listen, but you were talking about a story that you read, maybe it was Dostoevsky, and it was about a small town where these people thought they didn't have any culture, and then this one family that was the cultural center of that town, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't know that they didn't have it because they hadn't been exposed to other people, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Like that person, the piano player in that story, would have already posted her shit across 5 different platforms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and everybody would know exactly how many views it got.
Right. So there's an element of pressure, I think, now that like we didn't even grow up with, where like, you know, like when you were talking about freaks trying to out-freak each other, right? Most of the time that's because you feel a little weird to begin with, and so then you hang out with a bunch of weirdos, and then you start realizing that being weird is your superpower, and then you start leaning into it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you at least get to do that out of the sight of everybody else.
Right.
Like, I think now the moment you realize that anything is your superpower, then the next instinct is to try to, I don't even know if monetize it is the right word. It's more like status
content out
monetize.
of it. Yeah. It's like, well, it doesn't exist if it's not on the internet.
Right.
You know, like that's like the new comics. It's like, it's my first month of comedy. I'm putting every stand-up set on.
Right.
It's like, dude, give it 5 years. Like now nobody's seeing our shit because it's just bad. You know, it's like, you don't have to just make content. You can just, I mean, this is all about making content. So, I mean, I'm a hypocrite, but it's also like.
So, okay, let's explore that a little bit, though.
Yeah.
Because there's 2 sides to that, right? So, okay, why do you do this?
I mean, so I came to this like older, and I really tried to make it as a musician, and it ruined it for me. And so the real reason I do this is because if it gets 0 views and nothing, like this conversation is worthwhile. It's like a real moment. You're interesting. I want to talk to you. The ideas that we discuss are going to stick with me and influence my art. I'm going to get ideas from it, you know. We'll have made the connection. I want to be the best comedian I could be, so I'm holding a microphone in my hand, talking off the fly. We're laughing. We're getting into deep shit. So it's like, it's really that. But then it, you know, there's layers to the onion.
Sure.
And you get far enough out, it is like, I don't know, maybe you get a few more views and followers and you get booked.
Sure.
But that's just to get me back in the room where I can do the real thing. Like, I don't give a shit about the fleeting reels and the content, but it's like, it's quickly becoming like that is the game. And
very much so. And I mean, I think a lot of it's like,
I'm trying to,
first of all, I like what you said there, because I don't think this conversation would have been the same if you had just invited me over for a cup of tea. Right?
Right, yeah.
And I don't know what would be different.
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't be holding these.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's
I would still be like, would you mind holding
right.
You're like, it's not plugged in. I'm like,
just do it, man. It's what I'm into.
And he'd be like, I think I gotta go. I just remembered
But, yeah, I mean, there's like there's not even a structure to this podcast really, or this one here. I'm not talking about your overall podcast. I'm not sure if
this is free.
Not.
This is like free jam. I don't know much about Bitches Brew, but this is like that phase of Miles where it's like we might come back to the main line. We might tangent into like it's like, and then when we go back to making our structured, coherent thing, is we've gone out on a journey together.
Yeah,
you know.
But there's something about that, right? Like the fact that we're having this conversation with the potential for anybody to listen to it.
Yeah.
Changes the conversation.
Totally.
It's
and I found it seems to enhance it, which I never expected.
Yeah, you'd think that you would shrink a little, but it's actually just adding just enough performative quality to it that you feel like you gotta show up a little bit more.
Yeah, like people aren't gonna be like, let me just scroll for a minute. It's like, no, this is a podcast, so it's like, you know what I mean? It's like you bring your A game to the conversation a little more, which I like.
That's interesting, right? Because were you to do this and none of this be on right now, and you be the only one who knew it, this conversation would still be elevated by the experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah, wow. That's something worth thinking about. Like, what other things could you do to other aspects of your life to elevate them to this place?
Yeah, like I just started, I've done more of those solo podcasts. I think the Ego Death one might have been like one of the first ones. And the idea of like doing a Russian story was like, well, I would try to cover, Robert Johnson, and then I would try to write my own song. So it's like I'll try to cover an old story in my voice, and then I'll try to write a joke, and maybe it'll kind of like influence it in some way. But I've started to kind of work through new bits on here, and I feel like it relates to what you're saying in the sense that like just the fact that I know I'm putting it on the internet, it makes it's a little different than if I'm talking to myself in the car on the phone. I'm in here and I'm going like, well, I'm going to post it, whether anybody listens to it or not. And I think it squeezes a little more out of me. Like I did a blog years ago, and I was into these bloggers, and the idea that writing publicly is writing in your journal is like not lesser, but it's like it's different. Like public writing is transformative in a different way, because in your mind like it's going to be out there forever on the internet. Like the bots will parse it long after I'm gone, if things keep going. And that little hacks like that, it's almost like you're listening to the CD knowing later it's going to remind you of this time. You're like kind of reverse engineering these little
and also I think
hacks.
It's like we're talking to each other right now, but we're also talking to whoever might listen to this. And in that sense, we feel maybe a greater responsibility to make our ideas understood.
Yeah.
Maybe we feel a greater responsibility to make it entertaining as well. But I think like, I'm not trying to like be witty right now. Like I'm trying to just have I'm trying to be as enthusiastic about the direction this conversation is going as possible, because I think that is the most interesting thing. That's like when I listened to the podcast, I was like, yeah, we're going to get along fine, because I think we're both like curious about the same thing, which is, what's the most interesting part of the thing we're talking about, and let's fucking follow that rabbit down the hole, as opposed to try to structure it somehow.
Yeah, and I've gotten more confident at this. This is like episode 89, so I was a little more like, are we going to run out of things to talk about, or is it not going to be good, But now I have trust. I've done it enough times that I know like the funny shit is more likely to happen if we don't attempt.
Yeah, if you don't stress
it's authentically funny, you know what I mean? So it's like creating the conditions. And like you just hopped in right away, but a lot of people for the first 5-10 minutes, I'll see they're uncomfortable, and I'll be like, well, we're chopping this off, and then it just starts. But people will settle in, and then they kind of forget, and then that's like where it gets gold. But then some people like you could just like hop right in. So that's kind of been interesting too, as I've evolved, and then kind of how much I need to get other people comfortable so they can be in that relaxed state. Because I've been on podcasts where like you talk to a person, and then as soon as they hit record, they change their voice, and they're like, and they become some like talk show host, and it's like everything's we got to pretend everything's funny, and you're just like,
that's
dude,
funny.
this is like,
not
what I want.
I won't lie. I think I've been. Not podcasts, but I think I've been on radio interviews before. Yeah, where like I will like lean in and do the like, okay, like do a little bit of Wolfman Jack to it, just a little pepper on it, and it's like I remember one time I was like doing an interview on Sirius XM, and it was fully like the kids station and this and that, and like this was, I think I'd like recently won the Grammy, but the thing was we had a show the night before, and then me and the band went out and we got drunk, and for those who didn't hear that, because I put the mic away, drunk, the family band got drunk, and then so I come in and I'm like a little bit hungover, and I like kept my shades on because I was just like, dude, like I'm actually headache hungover. And I'm doing this interview and, we're joking back and forth. The DJ on Sirius XM is hilarious. She's also good at improv. We've also known each other for a while. And she kind of did this thing. She's like, oh, what? You think you're cool? You think you're cool? You got those shades on because you think you're cool? And I, of course, couldn't be like, no, I'm hungover.
Yeah.
But I remember that moment and I'm just like, yo, that's the last thing you ever fucking want is to be in the middle of an interview and have somebody be like, oh, are you trying to be cool?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, that's the trying to be cool that's what uncomfortable people do.
Yeah, it's a young person's game.
I mean, I've thought a lot about that because
as someone that's exhausted themselves trying to be cool so many different ways.
Right. I've thought about that in terms of the thing we were talking about before about like, the cynicism of youth where you try to get good at ripping shit apart.
Yeah.
So again, I've followed the words back to their core, right? 2 words that I think are really interesting when you think about it is cool and corny. Okay?
Yeah.
So cool, what does that mean? That kind of literally means that you're so cold that you don't feel shit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not really about vulnerability or authenticity or being able to kind of like act in the moment or anything like that. It's about being unfazed by
It's almost lifeless, right?
It's lifeless.
Like a corpse or something.
Yeah.
Like cold
or like
dead.
somebody that's so fucking desensitized.
Yeah.
Because so many bad things have happened to them.
Yeah.
And I mean, think of the classic like cool tropes of like the biker or like, the inner city kid on the streets. Like, why are they cool? Because so much bad shit has happened to them, that they now don't react to things anymore. And they're like the one that seems the coolest in the room because of it. It's like, is that what you want to be?
I mean, that's the theme I think about all the time too with like those old, like the Dostoevsky, Chekhov and all that is that like suffering makes you cool,
Yeah,
But,
right.
So it's like, in some ways, yeah, it's like, it's good and bad. Like, I mean, it's like, do you want your kids do you want to shelter them from all that horrible shit that made you close? It's like they're going to have to experience it. It's like on the other side of that, there's cool and there's cold. And I don't know. I don't have a coherent thought here.
Well, how about this? Something
that,
like suffering gives you more information about what life can do to you. And then you kind of have a choice about how you want to navigate that. Right? I know people that have had bad shit happen to them, and that bad shit has defined their character for the rest of their life. And then I know people that have had worse shit than that happen to them, and you wouldn't even know it. You know what I mean? And it's like, so I don't think it's that suffering itself has like
a merit
or like a definite effect. It's kind of what you do with it.
Right.
And it's like, I think there's something to that. I think there's something, matter of fact, like, I don't know, like, I had this podcast that I want to do called Midnight Sun, where it's just me interviewing people that went through terrible shit and be like, what light did you find in the darkest place?
Yeah.
And
I'd listen to that.
I think that'd be a really interesting thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It might be a bunch of really bummer conversations, but I think the navigation would have to be, the first big part of every episode would kind of be telling the story of the terrible thing that happened, which I think everyone has the feeling of they want to. You either want to listen to that because it's interesting, or you want to listen to that in the same way that people watch reality TV, because then you can walk away going, God, well, my shit ain't that bad compared to that.
It's like you want somebody on the open mic to bomb because that's like part of it. You know, it like that makes the next funny person funnier because you realize that you're like, ooh,
right. You kind of seeing a fall is a big deal.
Yeah,
but then I do think that a lot of people in the darkest place do find something, mostly because your whole self is falling apart at that point, and you almost have to reorganize yourself around a concept, right? Like, for instance, I know this woman, this fantastic woman up in Brooklyn, and she had a full-on aneurysm. She's an aneurysm survivor, and she had to literally reassemble her personality. Like, she had an aneurysm, and her whole self, her image of self, all of it just fell apart. And so she had to bring it all back together and kind of, consciously do that. And she's telling me this, and I'm like, can I ask you a million questions?
Yeah.
And she was so happy to hear that because she's like, dude, so many people just like try to back slowly out of that conversation as soon as I get to that point.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have a million questions. And I was like, did you have a basic concept, like a core concept that you chose to reorganize your entire character around? And without even thinking about it, she's like, yep, gratitude. And I was like, psh, best fucking answer in the world.
That is the best answer, yeah.
I can't think of a better word.
I mean,
concept.
that's the timeless one. I mean, that's something we've known. Like, it's kind of like religion, and whether people get mad about it, but it's to me, prayer really is just that, and that's why I have no problem with prayer. Like, it's.
Do you do it?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I probably wouldn't use that word, but I think gratitude is the word I would use. You know, like I try to sit in the morning and just like give thanks for I got all this amazing stuff going on. Even if the world ends next year, it's like it's a pretty amazing time to be here. So, and then I read
with words. You do that?
Yeah, with words out loud. And then I did a year where I wrote a gratitude note. I read a book called like A Simple Act of Gratitude by a guy basically I wrote a thank you note to somebody every day. And some days it would be a text message like, hey, remember that time last year? I appreciated that. Sometimes like, Mom, I love you, But I did that for a year, and then that was kind of a lot to do it every day forever. But now I try to, like, on a good morning when I'm not running late, I try to sit, and meditation for me has kind of drifted into like a gratitude practice, I guess, Like look up at the sky, brilliant. Say thanks, and then try to like hold on to that as the as all the all the just messages.
It's a lot better than opening up the news app the first.
Which I kind of I'm like, I've reached a point where it's like, if something that big happens, I'll hear about it from somebody. Like I don't need to.
I really am trying to figure out, because I know it's about concentric circles of influence. Like, it's more important to care about the things that you can change, right? We all know that. The hard part is when there's such massively crazy things happening that are actually affecting in a very terrible way real people in the country that you're in. Is there any influence that you have?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I'm trying to figure out, because in some senses I'm like, okay, well, why are you watching the news? Why are you like listening to podcasts all the time about what's happening, in the government? And, the easy answer is, well, you have to stay informed. It's your responsibility to stay informed. But then why? Why is it my responsibility? Because then you can do something about it.
Yeah.
What can I do?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I'm calling my representatives, I'll go to a protest, that kind of thing. But I'm just like, I don't know how convinced I am that that's doing anything.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be cynical there.
But you do a ton of stuff locally. I mean, I've kind of like been tangentially. There it is. So explore with that one. Tan? It's like you're been in the sun. But yeah, like you
Wait, you're a tangent?
Yeah, there you go. We should just do another episode where we just do that the whole time.
Just the etymology of shit. Yes. Just fake etymology.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing, embracing fake. Like it's ideas, in the ether. So none of this is like authority, it's not like we're not like scientists talking about facts.
Nothing but hot takes.
I forgot what I had there.
You were talking about.
Oh yeah, just that. That's kind of a thing. One of the main things I know you as is, besides being a musician. You mentioned the Grammy. I figure like people probably just ask you about that all the time, so I wasn't. But
appreciate that.
Well, yeah, what I'm trying to get at is the like you posted something recently about the instrument giveaway, and I think you're kind of someone that does act on a local level for
Try
things.
to.
Which is,
I think you can do things on a local
level. Which is impactful.
Yeah.
And you are a person that's known, so platform, you have more of that. So, I mean, I think that, you're a very good example of that.
There's no doubt that, like, it's funny. Somebody told me something once, a friend of mine who's a counselor. She actually moved to town. So, yes, Star Rose Bond, look her up. Great counselor. You should totally give her business. She told me one time she had, I think it was a boyfriend who they met during the Occupy Wall Street movement. And he was kind of like a leader in that movement and really like fiery and very well informed and, could see the thing all the way through to kind of like what this was supposed to be and how it would change and how it would bring down the powers that be and all that. And really every day in it, angry in it, and then she realized after a while that like, he had an issue with his mom that he wouldn't address. And it just kind of hit her like, you're spending so much time on this thing that you may or may not ever be able to influence, that you're ignoring the people that are so close to you that you absolutely 100% can influence and fix those problems.
Yeah, that's relatable, right? Look at me, everyone. I'm out in the street. I'm doing something. And you're like, you can't make that one phone call that would actually change more than...
Yeah, that would change the whole world.
Yeah.
So it's like, Yeah, it's so hard to remember that. It's hard to remember that, like, the
have
thing.
perspective on your own pain and stuff is hard too. I can see how somebody else, how she would see that more clearly than him, because you're just stuck in it.
Yeah, and you feel like
denial is so strong,
and anger is a thing that feels like it's gonna do something. You know what I mean? Anger is gasoline. Like,
and
anger,
it will. It'll fucking drive everyone away.
It'll
from
do
you.
something. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think
take your health. I mean, not always.
I'm not one of those people that
like a good punk show.
Yeah,
I don't go a lot anymore. But
I'll tell you what. I think that anger was one of my primary fuel sources for a lot of my life, and I'm even talking about making family music. And that seems crazy, but it's like there's a way that you can. I remember at one point I was like, I feel like there's kind of two ways to get energy. Personally, like there is the idea of like solar energy or passive, where like you take the beauty of everything in the world and you let it kind of like flow into you, and you convert that to energy, much like solar panels would do.
Yeah.
And then there's petroleum, which you take the deepest, darkest thing inside of you and you bring it up to the surface and explode it to make energy.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and you fucking ruin all the shit in the
right,
sky.
There's pollution involved. Yes. But I'm also
oceans.
like, I don't know. When I realized that, I was like, I know I'm doing a lot more of the petroleum thing. I know that like if you take a song like "Gotta Be Me," which is this anthem to individuality, it's like that's me going, hey, all you fuckers that like made fun of me as a kid, like I'm gonna take all of that and I'm gonna alchemize it and I'm gonna turn it into this, and hopefully some kid will hear the thing that I wish that I had heard.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a way to turn that anger into something beautiful.
Oh yeah, I love alchemize. That's a great.
Yeah.
Never heard it used as a verb like that, but that's. I mean, that's like the comedy is like it's like the most painful, vulnerable things. Then through that process, you transform it into light, and joy, and togetherness. So I mean, and I see that attempted and failed a lot, but that's beautiful too, because you have to keep going for it, but when it clicks in,
it's
and the next night the person might say the exact same lines in the same order and it doesn't. So it's just fleeting, and then which makes it even more valuable.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like you can't. It's just kind of you can't pen it down.
Yeah, that's some. Although, like, that's one thing also, as even before I started doing family music, I remember I had an album, couple albums before that. I have some Agent 23 albums out too. And one of them was me literally taking the idea of like better to light the candle than curse the darkness, where I was like, I'm going to do a whole album where I'm not in any way, bitching about anything, where I'm not cursing the darkness, where I'm really just kind of upping things. And, I think that's my worst album. I think that I really, I try to push against the idea of the struggling or the pain creating the art, because if that was true, and if you were dedicated to being an artist for your whole life, then by proxy, you're creating suffering for yourself so that you have fuel.
Yeah, and that's a lot of it too, the romanticizing the tortured artist. And you get older and you have kids, you're like, well, I want to do the art, but I'm not trying to be tortured. Yeah. I mean, I always will be to some degree, but I'm not trying to lean into that. It's like seeking it out.
We probably all have like enough for a lifetime,
Yeah. I mean, what a great thing to know though, to have made that album and then probably that gave you the clarity to do the next ones. Like,
also a good thing to know before I approached family music, because you would think that would be the way that you would lean, be like, oh, let's just only do positive stuff. But it's like, nah, let's think about what the terrible things about being a kid are, and like try to, talk about those in a way that can simultaneously entertain and be fun, and you can dance around and have a party to it, but also can make a kid go like, oh, okay, like, maybe that's not so bad. Maybe it'll be all right.
That's really interesting that you can do kind of top-down creation, or where you kind of think of like what you want to say before you like. I think I've pretty much I've tried that, but for me it's like just mumbling to myself with a guitar, and then later I figure out what it means. And with jokes, it's like somebody laughed at that this week, so I'll try it on stage. Oh, it got a laugh, and then I add more to it. But it's always been hard for me to go like, I want to talk about this and then be able to make art I'm happy with. Is that?
I've done a lot of that, and I think that's probably because of the family music thing. Is because like prior to that, it was more just me doing whatever, and I'm sure that it was somewhat defined by. I was thinking about this today as like there's kind of the three spheres, right? There's what you want, there's what the audience wants, or what you perceive the audience wants, and then there's what the market wants. And those are different things, and sometimes they overlap.
Damn market.
Yeah, right. But I mean, if you're gonna be
bane of my existence.
I know. It's a funny fucking thing, man. I mean, I feel lucky to have been able to like, the house I own is because of songs. That's crazy.
That
to
is
me.
awesome. Yeah.
It's crazy. You know,
the house I own is because of web development.
Yeah, well, and fucking that's great too.
Occasionally, I take my family out to a nice dinner. I go, comedy paid for this meal.
That's what.
Yeah.
And that
I got
that
paid
meal,
$100.
That meal tastes a little better, right?
It does. Yeah.
It does.
I'm like, and by the way, I'm going to be gone 3 nights this week. I like the end of it.
It's like, again, foul mouth jerk. I remember at a meal, and he's like, nothing smells like rap money.
Yeah, right.
But like, that's crazy, and it's so easy to fall into some bullshit when you think about the market. But it's like also like if you are trying to create something that is going to generate money, you're dumb not to think about the market. So what I try to do is like, I'll start with a concept that I think will make sense for all 3 of those spheres, where I'm just like, the market, based on what I've done before, like I think that this is an angle that at least wouldn't be repellent to the market.
Yeah.
I'm trying to serve my audience. I really do care about that. So it's like, what do they need to hear? What do they want to hear? And maybe most importantly, like, what do I want to do? And if I can find like a thing that lines all 3 of those things up, then I have my concept for an album or whatever. Then, I'll construct the songs based on those things. Then, like, as I try to like create those songs, I really try to forget about the market, because that's when you don't want to be thinking about it.
Right.
You want to think about it maybe at the beginning, and you definitely want to be thinking about it as you promote, but like, you do not want to be thinking about the market while you're making the shit. Matter of fact, I don't even know if you want to think about the audience while you're making.
I was
the
just
shit.
thinking that like the idea is not to think about any critics, but certainly the market is the one you want the farthest from your mind.
The critics that I do think about when I'm doing it, and it's funny because
people close to you who you respect,
not even respect, but like the bullies. And I don't mean, and okay, here's what I'm saying.
No, that makes sense. You can visualize it. Oh yeah, positive for kids. You want to picture that person and then try to like.
Well, what it is like there's certain people in my life that I felt like were so hardcore about certain concepts of hip hop. Well, not even of that, of being a fucking rapper, where it's just like, I know that the idea for a lot of people of kids hip hop or family hip hop is fucking so repellent.
Like an oxymoron, just the idea of it.
Or a betrayal.
You
know what I mean? Of a core concept or something. And so what I really have always tried to do. Minor keys. Right. And like if you were to, if you.
Trap hi-hats, minor keys.
Yeah. And
despair.
And concept being like, if you dumb it down, you are betraying the art form. But if you boil it down and if you make it strong, with these core concepts, then you're not. So like, it's funny because there's a few people that live in my head, like these demons that live in my head that are actual people. And when I'm writing a rhyme or whatever, if I try to go too simple, that person will pop up and just be like, all right, motherfucker, we see what you're doing. And I'll be like, fine. And I'll like write it. And the funny thing is I've talked to them about this and they're like, dude, I don't feel that way at all. And like, it's like their face is the mask that my own insecurity wears in order to keep my shit so sharp that when I then go up in front of a crowd or I'm trying to promote it or something like that, there's a chip on my shoulder that I'm just like, you might not like the concept, but you will fucking like the rhymes because I crafted them so hardcore that like, this shit has like 5 syllables and each one rhymes and it's like a perfectly crafted gem. It's like, you can hate the concept, but you can't hate the craftsmanship. Yeah. And the reason that that's that way is because I put that kind of pressure on myself based on these people who would never put that pressure on me to begin with. Yeah. Which is a really funny way to do things. It
suits your process. I think at the end of the day, it's like, it doesn't even have to be real. It's like if you come up with a process that works for you.
I think so.
And that's, you've been doing it a long time. So that's like my favorite topic is like, when you're starting, for me, it was so hard to, I like wanted to write songs for like 5 years and never even got one that I would call a song for that long. And then later you can kind of crank them out a bit more. And then you're like, well, I've written this song 20 times. So I need to try to fail in a new way.
Right.
The camera actually just overheated and went off, but I don't know. It's almost 5 and we're at an hour 24. You want to just wrap it up there?
Yeah, that's fine, man. Do you feel like you got what you wanted?
Yeah, and more.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I think that was good conversation, man.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping that it would be tangential as shit because I think that with what I was listening to, I listened to the Seth Kaufman one too.
Yeah.
And I think that dipping in and out of what it is to be a creator, but then like having that go all over the place, like, and stay messy. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You get it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
You can come back on anytime.
Love to, man.
Cactus.
I feel like we barely scratched the surface.
Yeah. This is chapter 1.
Thanks, man.
All right, dude. Thanks.